In this video, we address the first declension nouns of Koine Greek. I told you last week that I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, so here I go again. Greek is a highly inflected language. Greek words are going to change based on their grammatical function in a sentence. Whereas in English, we are highly dependent on word order to make grammatical sense of a clause in a sentence. Greek word order is highly flexible because words look different depending on their grammatical function in a sentence. So Greek words are going to change based on their case, their gender, and their number. So over here, we see that the different cases have different grammatical functions in a sentence. The nominative is normally the subject. The genitive shows possession or describes with the English word translation of. The dative is normally the indirect object translated to or for, and the accusative is the object of a sentence. Greek nouns also have one of three different grammatical genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. And depending what gender they are is going to have some say in what they look like in their different forms in the different declensions, which we're going to talk about in just 1 second here. And they also change for number, whether they are plural or singular. What I want you to do, same thing we did last week. The repetition is intentional here. I want you to sort of map onto this English sentence the different Greek cases. So which words in this sentence would be in the different Greek cases? So go ahead and pause the lecture, make that determination, and I'll give you the answer here as soon as you unpause. So I've colored this in here for us. We have Dr. Elder as the nominative subject, the one doing the verb, teaches. And the object of the teaching is the basics of Greek. So the basics should be in the accusative case, of Greek in the genitive, describing the basics. And to the students is in the accusative case as the indirect object. So a little bit more on Greek grammatical basis. We talked about declensions last week, what they are. A declension is a pattern by which a Greek word will change based on, will change its endings based on its case and number. There's three different declensions in Greek. The first, the second, and the third. We introduced the second last week. You were asked to memorize a number of second declension forms, and what we're going to do this week is in this video is introducing the first declension. So the other major group of one of the other major groups of Greek nouns, how they inflect for their different endings. So remember with the second declension, most second declensions nouns are either masculine or neuter in Greek. There are some exceptions. There are some feminine second declension nouns. And similarly with the first declension, most first declension nouns are going to be feminine. So the large majority of Greek nouns in the first declension are feminine, but there is a small group of masculine third declension nouns, and these are going to end in eta, sigma, or alpha, sigma in the nominative masculine singular. And so this is what these forms look like. This is the paradigm that Black gives you in his grammar. We're not going to go through this extensively, but my aim here is to sort of break this down for you. And the good news is that you also do not have to memorize all of this for this week. Your task for this week is to really focus on memorizing the definite article paradigm. And once you do that, you'll see actually quite a bit of similarities to the feminine first declension forms here, so that your memorization of the definite article will actually assist you in being able to recognize these for parsing and for translating sentences. So just another reminder here that declension is not directly correspondent to gender. While most first declension nouns are going to be like this, they're going to be feminine nouns, there are some first declension masculine nouns, and mathetes and neonios is one or two examples of this. So trying to break this paradigm down a little bit further, here I have removed the word stems and have shown you that the words that have their stem ending in epsilon, iota, or rho are going to follow this, what is often called the pure alpha paradigm. This is the singular, and then the plural over here is going to be shared for all of these. So there's no difference in the plural for any of these 5 different paradigms. Stems that end in what is called a sibilant, a letter that makes an S sound, are going to follow what is usually called the mixed paradigm, where we have alpha and eta mixed in together here. And then stems that end in any other letter are going to end with this eta paradigm here, where a pure eta paradigm, where the eta is consistent throughout. And then over here in the masculine, the differences that we should note are that because the masculine nominative singular of the first declension ends in epsilon sigma or alpha sigma, what we might expect for the genitive feminine first declension, the oo from the second declension. So this should look familiar to you from last week as the genitive masculine or neuter second declension ending. This ending is borrowed to avoid confusion so that we wouldn't have an identical endings between the nominative and the genitive if these were to be pulled over here. A few other observations. Note that here the dative, the iota, is consistent in the singular. It's always going to be subscripted. So I always think of this as singular as smaller. Singular is just one, so it's smaller. So the smaller iota is going to appear subscripted in the dative. This is true not only of this first declension paradigm, but also the second declension paradigm. Remember that we have the iota subscript in the dative of the second declension. And it's also true of the plural. And so the larger iota, the iota that is not subscripted, is bigger or more. So it corresponds to the plural. Also notice that the own is characteristic of the genitive plural for all of these different paradigms here. So remember, this plural sort of comes down here and is the same for all of these. So the own, whenever you see an own like that, especially with the circumflex accent over it, you know you have a genitive plural. And lastly, to repeat myself, the oo up here is borrowed from the second declension to avoid confusion so that we wouldn't have repeated endings between the nominative and the genitive. And so here I have condensed the paradigm even a little bit further. So I've consolidated the feminine singulars of the pure alpha, the pure eta, and those mixed paradigms sort of into one column with slashes, so that if you see any of these, you are able to map them on to their case here. And then the same with the masculine, where I have put both of the paradigms into one column for the masculine here. And yet again, the plural is going to be the exact same for both of these here. So I want to tell you a little piece of trivia here. The actress who plays Xena Warrior Princess, her name is Xena Ionisas. You may or may not have known that. I didn't know it because it's not true. But I correlate Xena with Xena, and these are the endings, or a mnemonic for the endings, I should say, for the first declension. So these are going to be sort of our most common first declensions here, and I should color in our iota subscript there with yellow. So Xena Ionisas correlates over here to our different first declension feminine endings as a sort of mnemonic that pairs with our other friend who we met last week, Swain Ionisus. So you're going to see these two figures kind of show up throughout the paradigms. I will often in these videos sort of put them in small print underneath a paradigm, should this mnemonic be helpful for you. If this mnemonic is not helpful for you, you can ignore Swain and Xena altogether and just kind of focus in on the letters. Sort of different associations work for different people. So if these associations work for you and help you to sort of plug into and fill out the paradigms, then by all means use them. If they don't, do not use them. Do what works for you. So here we have, I've combined for us, again, in an attempt to simplify here, I've combined the second declension masculine, the first declension feminine, and the second declension neuter paradigms. And so what I want to do is here I have given us only first declension nouns. I want you to pause the lecture and see if you can parse these four different first declension first declension nouns without respect to any notes. So making a guess at the parsing information here. And so now what I've done is I have reproduced right here the sort of 5 different paradigms, the sort of accordioned out, the expanded version of the first declension, the feminine and the masculine. So go ahead and see if you can check yourself using this, see if you can determine what you got right and what you got wrong over here. So here are the answers, and as always, forgive my chicken scratch, but what we have with phonane is an accusative feminine singular. With mathe 2, we have a genitive masculine singular, so this is a first declension masculine noun, unlike most other first declension nouns, which are going to be feminine. Hemeron, we have a genitive feminine plural. This own ending is always going to tell us genitive plural. The feminine we know because we know that hemera is a feminine noun. So the own doesn't necessarily tell us that it's feminine because the masculine and the nominative also have this own ending. But knowing that hemera is by its gender a feminine noun gives us this feminine information here. And then doxis is a dative feminine plural noun. And once again, having given you those answers and this information, I want you to answer these questions right here. Which word in the of these here would be the direct object in a sentence? And which of these 4 words would be an indirect object? So phonane as an accusative in the accusative case would be a direct object, and doxase as a dative would be an indirect object. So now we're going to do a little bit of practice translation based on some of the information that you now have about these first declension nouns. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can translate this sentence here. I'll read it for us first. Luo doulon in ecclesia. And sort of having gone out at with no helps, I give you here now a couple different helps. First, some vocabulary down here. I give you the present active indicative endings over here. And then I've given you that sort of simplified chart of the different cases, the different case endings for the second, first, and second declension in the masculine, feminine, and neuter respectively. So having these tools, go ahead and see if you can self-correct really quick. So we're going to look something like this. Luo is going to be our verb in the sentence. And the subject in this case is embedded in the verb. It's an I release or I loose. There is no nominative noun in the sentence. So the subject is embedded in the verb. I loose a slave or a servant. Doulon is in the accusative case. So it's the object of the sentence. And in a church. So in is a preposition that takes the dative case. So after in, you're going to find a dative noun. So in a church. So I release a servant or a slave in a church. Let's do another one here. Let's go at it cold with no resources. I'll read it for us. Gropse, apostolos, parabalein, neania. So now that you've had an attempt at the translation cold, here is some vocabulary for you. The endings for the present active indicative and the different noun endings in the second and first declension. So what we have here, gropse is going to be our verb. And notice that ps sound, grapse. So this is a sigma that's sort of hidden in here by way of amalgamation. The phi plus the sigma make a psi. So this is actually going to be a future tense. He, she, or it will write. And we need to find who that he, she, or that it is. In this case, we have it in the next word with the nominative, the subject of the sentence, apostolos. So an apostle will write. And what is written? The object of the sentence, parabolein, a parable to a young man. So Nyania in the dative case here is the indirect object. So an apostle will write a parable to a young man.